Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
The Whistle Stop Cafe in Mirror opened up last weekend. RCMP say that business will face charges.
General community transmission does cost lives, and that is why this is irresponsible and selfish.
At what point do you have to say our elected officials aren't listening? They won't listen. They're never going to listen. So what are we going to do to take control of our own destiny? And I'm not closing.
What is an Albertan? And an Albertan, in my mind, is Chris. Chris is a true Albertan, and there's many more to stand up. They're just waiting for that one person to do it, and the follow suit will come.
A show of defiance and desperation by restaurant owners across the province today. In a collective movement, they openly violated health restrictions and opened their dining rooms.
We have already provided billions of dollars of supports to businesses throughout the pandemic.
The majority of people have this idea that these subsidies that they're giving restaurants and other businesses are free money. They're not. That's my kids' money. That's my money maybe 5-10 years down the road.
Henshaw and Kenny, you've got to listen to us. This is so much bigger.
We cannot let the actions of a minority dictate, again, what the majority get to do.
Honestly, the things they say, I don't even know if they can hear the words coming out of their own mouths. The majority of Alberta is speaking, and they're speaking loud.
We're all going in together.
That's great. I think 9 of you just showed up in 3 helicopters.
And I came in this country 23 years ago as a war immigrant, and I choose to come here to enjoy freedom. Look what it came. You have no idea what support and respect you have, not only from me, Chris.
We're at the mercy of politicians right now. Every Albertan, in one way or another, whether they know it or not, they're being held against their will. People aren't allowed to earn a living. It's no matter what way you look at this, we're all political prisoners at this point.
We've got a major victory to report in the Alberta Restaurant Rebellion. Now, the Restaurant Rebellion was first started when Mirror Alberta's Chris Scott opened up his little Whistle Stop Cafe to the open arms of his community. Alberta restaurants at the time had been closed to dine-in services since the middle of December. But by January, with no end in sight to the closure of his restaurant, Chris just reopened in complete defiance of the lockdown orders. And customers came and filled up his small diner day after day after day. And so did Alberta Health Services and the local RCMP. Day after day, Chris was subject to constant surveillance and constant visits from the local police and Alberta health inspectors. Chris was given a closure order and then 2 summonses to appear in provincial court for violating the public health order. In the midst of all of this, a rebellion was inspired. Restaurants from all across the province followed suit, also breaking the lockdown to welcome customers back into their dining rooms again. The rebellion grew. It spread to Cold Lake and Bashaw, Sylvan Lake, Big Valley, Smith, Red Deer, Hanna. And the rebellion grew so fast that the Alberta government was forced kicking and screaming into announcing an official launch date for restaurants. That date, February 8th. Now, Alberta Health Services sought and won an emergency court injunction to close Chris's Whistle Stop. This was especially draconian and spiteful because then it meant a bench warrant could be issued for Chris's arrest if he was found to be in breach of the judge's emergency order. Now, that emergency injunction came just 2 business days before the official reopening launch date for restaurants across the province. But Chris wasn't worried because we had hired him a top-notch criminal lawyer at no cost to Chris through FightTheFines.com. That lawyer is named Chad Williamson, and he worked diligently, aggressively, and passionately on Chris's case. And now, Chris and Chad have scored a major victory against the entire health bureaucracy here in Alberta and everything that bureaucracy could have thrown at Chris. Just take a look at this. Alberta Health Services has stopped pursuing legal action against a small town cafe for defying the province's public health orders and has even covered the owner's legal fees. Now, just take a listen to that lawyer, Chad Williamson, explaining exactly what happened here.
Yeah, there have indeed been some interesting developments in this one, and flatly, we see these developments as a resounding victory for Albertans. AHS has essentially abandoned their application against Chris and the Whistle Stop and has agreed to pay Chris and the Whistle Stop court costs. Now, that's huge. As you know, Alberta Health Services had applied with extremely limited notice for a court order against the Whistle Stop in the friendly hamlet of Mirror, Alberta, out in the county of Lacombe. And AHS had sought a sweeping range of remedies against the Whistle Stop, including compliance with the Public Health Act and a standing order requiring the Whistle Stop to comply with all Chief Medical Officer orders, present and future, to shut down dine-in services and to grant power to law enforcement to essentially take action against anyone who may have contravened such an order. Now, on February 3rd, as everyone knows, AHS, counsel for AHS and myself appeared in the Red Deer courthouse to argue the merits. And frankly, I think everyone expected this to be a 5-minute laydown and a quick victory for the government. Submissions to the court actually proceeded for a couple of hours, diving into constitutional arguments and our appeal to the court that the government should not be able to essentially truncate the legal process and that we should have the ability to make full answer and response to the AHS application, including bringing a thorough and fulsome cross-application to challenge the validity not only of the actions of AHS but of the Alberta government as they may relate to what we consider to be a completely arbitrary application of these restrictive orders against some Albertans and not some other Albertans, and which may go against the very thread of liberty and democracy in this province. And while the AHS was able to secure a temporary injunction against the Whistle Stop for a couple days on policy grounds, the court set a rigorous litigation schedule, allowing us to essentially bring full weight to bear and challenge the AHS on multiple fronts. What essentially happened next is, prior to our ability to conduct relevant research, draft court documents, required to bring our cross-application and begin conducting cross-examinations, AHS bailed on its application. Now, it's my understanding that the position of AHS, and of course I don't want to necessarily misstate them, but I believe that they simply say that due to the government lifting restrictions and allowing dine-in services, that their application and the remedies that they were seeking became moot. We take exception to that. Quite frankly, the constitutional arguments, adjudication of this matter, that stuff, we don't think it is moot. Compliance with to dine-in restrictions wasn't the only remedy that AHS sought against the Whistle Stop. They sought compliance with all orders on an ongoing basis, including new restrictions, which essentially require restaurateurs to act as agents of the government and collect contact details from patrons and ID from patrons, meaning that diners may potentially have their privacy infringed by the restaurateur on behalf of the government when they go out to eat. Now, those type of restrictions, quite frankly, they just need to be challenged. We take the position that this matter and the arguments here need to be put before the honorable courts of this province to be tested legally and on grounds of public policy. In abandoning their application, which includes abandoning any remedies sought against our client to comply with this stuff, AHS has essentially truncated the legal process, first by getting a temporary injunction and then performing what amounts to a take back prior to my office being able to mount a vigorous and fulsome response and defense. One of the beautiful things about the rules is that if you bring an application and discontinue it, to get the other side to consent to the discontinuance, you are typically required to pay the other side or the winner court costs, which is exactly what happened in this case. Now, it's important to point out that the final order is still before the court here, and technically the discontinuance and the order ending the application still need to be executed by a judge and filled with the court. The paperwork was submitted to the court more than a week ago, and it still needs to obviously be executed and finalized, but we're fairly confident that this application turned in the favor of our client. And furthermore, nothing precludes our client from being able to bring a new action on constitutional grounds, potentially seeking damages. And while I'm not in a position to get into litigation strategy, suffice it to say that my office is exploring all of the options that are potentially available to our client in this case. My office has essentially been tasked with leading the charge here in Alberta as the tip of the spear to check government overreach and any infringement on civil liberties of Albertans, both matters of constitutional and civil importance. We've opened dozens of files and we're routinely scoring successes across the board. I'm fortunate enough to work with one of the most creative, talented, and enthusiastic legal teams in Calgary, and for that matter across the province, and we'll continue to fight for Henry and Martha and for all, for that matter, all Albertans in the weeks and months ahead, and it's an honor and a privilege to do so.
Now, I also went down to the Whistle Stop last week for a burger and a visit with my new friend Chris to talk about what he had just won. Check it out.
So, Chris, you have a little bit of a victory under your belt. Why don't you tell us exactly what happened in court? Or I guess not in court, never went to court.
Yeah, it didn't go to court. So what happened was my lawyer and I discussed how we're going to proceed with this, and I said that I was going to contest AHS's application to have me closed. So we went forward, and he communicated with AHS that was our intent, and we needed time to gather evidence, and we needed disclosure from AHS. So they adjourned for it was 2 weeks or so. About a week ago, he had a conversation with AHS's counsel, letting him know what our intent was, and that we were going to have to bring in the Alberta government into this as well, because it was part of this was their doing. And a couple hours later, we got a call back saying that AHS was asking to dismiss and didn't want to proceed with the hearing.
And sounds like they have to pay you costs.
Yeah, they're paying the court costs, which is pretty amazing.
Why do you think they did this?
Well, I don't want to speculate too much, but I have a feeling if you're going to go to court and you don't have evidence to back up what you've done or what you've asked, then what's the point?
So now what's next for you?
Next for me is a statement of claim. So I'm done being on the defensive. We're going to go on the offensive now, and we're going to try and hold accountable the people that have done these lockdowns and done it in a irresponsible and mismanaged manner.
What does that look like?
What does it look like?
Yeah.
It looks like a mountain of work. It's never easy fighting the government in a government court. So my lawyers have a ton of work ahead of them, but any time the Constitution or a constitutional challenge is brought before the courts, it opens up a whole can of worms. So what we're hoping for is to set some precedent here to ensure that this can't happen to Canadians again.
And if people at home want to help Chris, they can donate to cover his legal costs, to hold the government to account for what they've done to him at fightthefines.com. Do you have a message for people at home who are seeing you fight this fight and they want to get involved, they want to help, or maybe they want to do the same, they want to open up their own business?
Well, it's a scary time to open up your own business right now, I'm fairly certain. If you want to help, I would say the best thing to do is talk to your friends, talk to your neighbors, let them know what's going on, let them know that there are people out there that are fighting for the rights that we're losing slowly, but we're losing our rights. Become engaged in civil discourse with your friends and neighbors, and just make sure that this isn't something that we don't want something like this to ever fizzle out, because when it comes to our rights, it's something we should never stop fighting for. And you may agree with me, you may not, but in the end, this is something for all Canadians. It's not just me, and it's not just restaurants.
Now, it would appear that Alberta Health Services in advance leaked the information that Chris had won against them to the media so that Alberta Health Services could control the narrative, that they had somehow done the right thing and that everybody is getting along again and that there was no real damage to Chris and that everybody is just happy friends again. Well, no. The fight is just beginning to put that health bureaucracy back in its place, and they've been taught one very serious lesson, but there are many more lessons for this government and that health bureaucracy that they need to learn the hard way. And I am so very happy to help them learn those lessons. Now, if you'd like to help us continue to help Chris as he drags the entirety of the Alberta government, again, kicking and screaming back to their constitutional obligations, and help us help other restaurants that rebelled with Chris against the government, please donate today at fightthefines.com. Fighting back works. That's the moral of the story here. Chris Scott and the Whistle Stop took on the entire Alberta government. It was a staring contest, and the government blinked first. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. Our legal efforts to fight the government through fightthefines.com are working. They're successful. If you'd like to support our largest civil liberties project to date, fighting these lockdown tickets, one Canadian and one fine at a time, please donate today at fightthefines.com. And if you're someone who has received a lockdown ticket, we don't want you to pay it. We want you to fight it. Send it to us at fightthefines.com, and we'll put you in touch with the top criminal lawyer who may be able to help you at no cost to you. Again, that special website is fightthefines.com.